Part 4 of the Hidden Birds Awaiting Death. Maggie remained in the house, sitting before the fireplace where a fire blazed. Mrs. Smith sat beside her, tending to her, trying to coax her to eat something to settle her stomach. Tears streamed down the housekeeper's face, utterly distraught by the grim news, while Maggie remained silent, consumed by a pain so immense she couldn't even cry aloud. A knock sounded at the door. Maggie rose, wondering who could possibly have traversed the muddy terrain to reach them at such a time. She was also amazed at how quickly news traveled from one distant farm to another. Father Ralph stood in the hallway, his riding clothes soaked and caked with mud. "May I come in, Mrs. Smith?" "Oh, Father," Mrs. Smith cried out, rushing to embrace Father Ralph, who looked bewildered. "How did you hear the news?" "Mrs. Cleary sent me a telegram. Archbishop de Contini gave me permission to find a plane to come here. I nearly crashed when landing, hitting the mud so hard. That's how I knew what the ground was like before I even set foot on it. How beautiful and dear Gillenbilla is. I left my luggage at the Chawa house. Fortunately, the owner of the Imperial Hotel lent me a horse. He thought I'd gone mad and bet me a bottle of Johnny Walker if I made it through all this mud. But no matter how big the fire and how much damage it caused, it's not the end of the world," he said, smiling gently, placing a hand on Mrs. Smith's shoulder. "I came here and tried my best to see what I could do to help. I hope you'll understand. Please don't cry anymore." "Then you don't know anything, Father," Mrs. Smith whispered through her tears. "Know what happened? Mr. Cleary and young Stuart are both dead." Father Ralph's face paled. He gently pushed the housekeeper away. "Where is Maggie now?" Father Ralph almost screamed. "In the living room. Mrs. Cleary is currently out in the pasture with the bodies of her two loved ones. Jack and Tom have gone to bring their bodies back. Oh, Father, sometimes, no matter the faith in my heart, I can't help but wonder why God is so cruel. Why did God take both of them?" But as soon as he knew where Maggie was, Father Ralph discarded his rain-soaked head covering and strode directly into the living room, leaving muddy footprints behind him. "Maggie," he called loudly. Ralph knelt beside the armchair, taking Maggie's cold hands and holding them in his own. Maggie slumped lower in the chair, collapsing into Father Ralph's embrace, burying her face in his soaked shirt and closing her eyes. It was a feeling of exquisite happiness, despite the agony and sorrow consuming her. She had dreamed of this moment becoming a reality. Ralph had come, proof of the power she still held over him. Maggie was not mistaken. "You're wet from head to toe, my dear child." "You're soaking wet now, too," he whispered, his cheek pressed against her golden brown hair. "It doesn't matter, your coming is enough." "Yes, I came. I wanted to be sure you weren't going through anything upsetting. I had a premonition that my presence would help you. I wanted to find out what happened firsthand." "Oh, Maggie, your father and Stuart? What happened?" "Father was trapped in the burning sheep dip. Stuart found him, but then a wild boar gored him to death after he shot it. Jack and Tom have gone to bring their bodies back." Father Ralph remained silent, knowing nothing else to do but hold Maggie in his arms, rocking her gently like a baby until the warmth of the fireplace dried his clothes and hair. Then he felt the body he held so tightly against him seemingly relax, slowly stretching into a comfortable posture. Ralph cupped Maggie's chin, lifting her head to make her look at him, to stop her thinking, and then he kissed her. It was an impulse of unknown origin, completely devoid of lust, merely an instinctive gesture, an offering in response to what he had read in Maggie's brown eyes, something very special, like administering the sacrament for a second time. Maggie slid her hands behind him, clutching his muscular back so hard that he flinched and cried out in pain. "What's wrong?" Maggie asked, pulling back slightly. "I think I was scraped on the side when the plane landed. The mud came up to the fuselage. It was extremely dangerous. I wasn't thrown around because I hit the back of the front seat." "Let me see." Maggie's nimble and decisive fingers unbuttoned and removed Ralph's shirt. Beneath his tanned, wet skin, a red bruise stretched from one side to the other. "Oh, Ralph," she said anxiously, "you rode a horse all the way from Gillenbilla with an injury like this. You must be in such pain. How do you feel? Are you dizzy? Could you have internal bleeding?" "No, I don't feel anything strange. I'm telling the truth. I was so worried about getting here early to help you avoid further grief from the fire that I forgot my own pain. If I had internal bleeding, I'd know." No, Maggie. Maggie bent her head, her lips lightly touching the bruise, while her hands moved over Ralph's chest, stroking lightly from bottom to top, lingering provocatively on his shoulders, making Ralph feel bewildered, both seduced and afraid. At all costs, Father Ralph wanted to escape the caress. He turned away, pushing Maggie's head back, but only to fall back into her embrace. Her arms were like snakes, tightly coiling around Father Ralph's will, crushing any nascent resistance. He forgot his pain, forgot the church, forgot God. Ralph sought Maggie's lips, her eagerness making them part yearning. Ralph held Maggie tightly, but couldn't quell the rising surge of desire. Maggie arched her neck, exposing her smooth, cool shoulders. Ralph felt himself sinking deeper and deeper, suffocating, helpless. The awareness of his ordinary, sinful self pressed down on Ralph, a weight capable of crushing his soul, shattering long-suppressed emotions, sweeping him away on an irresistible tide. Ralph wanted to cry. What little desire remained drained away under the burden of his humanity. He gently removed Maggie's hands, which were tightly wrapped around his pitiful body, then crouched, head bowed, as if his mind were gone, staring at his trembling hands on his knees. Maggie, what have you done to me? And what would you do if I let everything happen? I love you, Maggie, I will always love you, but I am a priest. I can't do that, just because of that. Maggie sprang up, adjusting her clothes neatly, looking down at Father Ralph, her smile forced but unable to hide the pain in her eyes, the bitter disappointment. All right, Ralph, I'll go see if Mrs. Smith has prepared anything for you to eat. Then I'll bring you some liniment they use for horses. It's wonderful for bruises. It'll make you feel better immediately, much more effective than kisses, I think. Can the telephone be used? Father Ralph finally spoke. A telegraph line has been strung across the treetops in the last few hours, connecting us to Gillenbilla. In any case, Father Ralph needed a few minutes to compose himself after Maggie left the living room. He sat down at Fiona's writing desk. Please connect me to Interprovincial. This is Father Ralph de Brickassart at Drogeda. Oh, hello, Doran, is that you? Still faithfully working at the post office? I see. I'm glad to hear your voice. I don't know who's on duty at the Sydney Exchange. I only hear a cold, dull voice. I need to urgently contact the apostolic delegate in Sydney. His number is 202324. While waiting for Sydney, please connect me to Bongala, Doran. Just as Ralph relayed the news to Martin King, Sydney called, but a few words with Bongala were enough. All of Gillenbilla would know through Martin King, and many others on the line who often enjoyed eavesdropping on calls. All who dared to brave the mud would be present at the funeral. Hello, is that His Grace? This is Father Ralph, I'm at Drogeda. Oh, hello, Doran, don't hang up, please. Yes, thank you, I arrived safely, but the plane was bogged down in the mud up to its fuselage. I'll probably have to return by train. In the mud, Your Grace. Mud, I said, a quagmire? No, Your Grace, it's impossible to travel here if there's heavy rain from Gillenbilla to Drogeda. I had to come by horse. It's the only means of transport usable in this weather. That's why I called you, Your Grace. I'm very glad I came. I had a premonition. Yes, it's terrible, far beyond what I feared. Patrick Cleary and his son, Stuart, are both dead. The father died in the fire, the son was gored to death by a wild boar. A wild boar, Your Grace, I said, a wild boar. Yes, Your Grace, your observation is correct. They speak a rather peculiar English here. With your permission, Your Grace, I would like to stay for the funeral, and I assure Your Grace that I will fully care for the poor wife and her children. Yes, Your Grace. Thank you, Your Grace. I will return to Sydney as soon as everything is settled. Naturally, the switchboard operator also overheard Ralph's request to speak with Bongala. He spoke with Martin King for a few minutes and decided the funeral would be held the day after tomorrow. Maggie returned with a bottle of liniment in her hand, but made no move to care for Father Ralph herself. She silently handed him the bottle. Maggie briefly informed Father Ralph that a hot meal would be served by Mrs. Smith in the small dining room in about an hour, giving him ample time to wash up. He sadly realized that Maggie seemed to consider herself deceived by him, but he didn't understand why she reacted this way or on what basis she condemned him. Maggie knew he was a priest, so why this anger and resentment? In the gloomy dawn, the procession carrying the two bodies reached the far bank of the river and stopped there. Although the Gillen River had not yet overflowed its banks, it was high and flowing swiftly, 10 meters deep. Father Ralph guided his chestnut horse across the muddy river to meet the procession. He was already wearing his stole and carried all the necessary priestly items in a saddlebag on his horse. While Fiona, Bob, Jack, Huey, and Tom stood around, Father Ralph opened the shrouds covering the two bodies and prepared to administer the anointing of the sick. After witnessing Mary Carson's death, no other death could disgust Father Ralph as much. Both bodies were burnt black, while Stuart had suffocated. Ralph embraced and kissed both bodies with affection and reverence. Along the 20-kilometer journey, the tin sheet carrying the bodies jolted up and down behind two plow horses, sinking deep into the mud, leaving long furrows that might still be visible years later, like scars that even in future springs, when grass grew over them, would not conceal. The swift-flowing water forced the procession to stop on the other bank, even though they were only 2 kilometers from the house. "I have an idea," Bob said, turning to Father Ralph. "Only your horse is strong enough here. You could ride it back across the stream to the house and find some empty 200-liter drums. Make sure to seal the lids tightly so no water gets in, weld them if necessary. We'll need about 10 or 12 drums. You can tie them together and bring them across to this bank. We'll use those drums to carry the tin sheet and push it across the bank like a raft." Father Ralph agreed without question. He had no better idea. Dominic Orer and his 2 sons helped Father Ralph carry out Bob's suggestion. Then Father Ralph and Dominic Orer themselves pulled the drums across the stream. There were no flowers on the 2 coffins, nor were there any in the vases in Drogeda's chapel. The flowers that had survived the terrible heat of the fire were crushed by the rain, their petals scattered in the mud like trapped butterflies. Everyone was so tired, utterly exhausted. Those who had made the long journey on horseback along the muddy road to offer their final farewells to Patty were all weary. Those who had carried the bodies back were also tired. The men and women who handled the cooking and cleaning were also exhausted. Father Ralph was so tired he felt as if he were walking in a dream. His eyes dully scanned the faces: Fiona's tense, desperate face, Maggie's sorrowful and angry face, and the deep pain of Bob, Jack, and Huey, who had always been so close and loving. After the ceremony, the guests from afar mounted their horses and departed, backs bowed, covered with cloaks. Some only spoke of the impending bankruptcy that might strike others. Many thanked God for saving them from death and the fire. Father Ralph gathered his belongings, knowing full well he had to leave immediately before he lost the ability to detach himself from this place. He found Fiona sitting silently at her writing desk, staring at her hands. "Are you well, Fiona?" Father Ralph asked, then sank into a nearby armchair. She turned to him, heartbroken and numb, making him afraid to look directly at her. "Yes, Father, things will settle. I have to manage the farm's accounts and the 5 remaining children, 6 including Frank. But we can't expect anything from Frank, can we, Father? I can't express how grateful I am for what you've done in this matter. It's a great comfort to know you looked after Frank. It eased his fate somewhat. Oh, I wish I could see Frank just once, Father." Like a lighthouse, Father Ralph thought to himself. Fiona, like a lighthouse, emitting beams of sorrow whenever her mind is most profoundly and intensely agitated. "Fiona, there's something I want you to think about." "Yes, what is it, Father?" And then she drifted off into emptiness again. "Are you listening to me?" Father Ralph asked anxiously, his heart more fearful than ever. For a long moment, the priest thought she had withdrawn so deeply that even his firm voice couldn't rouse her. But once again, the lighthouse emitted a beam of light. Her lips moved. "My poor Patty, my poor Stuart, my poor Frank," she murmured, whimpering. Then she composed herself again, retreating behind her hard exterior as if nothing could shake her. Her eyes roamed the room without seeing anything. "Yes, Father, I'm listening." "Listen, Fiona, what about your daughter? Have you forgotten you have a daughter?" Her brown eyes looked up at Father Ralph, for a moment almost pitying. How could a woman forget her daughter? But what was a daughter but a reminder of long-suffered pain, a younger reflection of herself, doomed to repeat all the experiences she had endured and to cry all the tears she had cried? "No, Father, I've tried to forget I have a daughter. If I remember her, I'll treat her like one of my sons. A mother usually remembers her sons." "Have you ever cried, Fiona? I only saw you cry once." "You'll never see it again, Father. My tears have dried up inside me." Her whole body trembled. "Do you know, Father, 2 days ago, I realized how much I loved Patty. But like everything in my life, it came too late. Too late for him, too late for me. Do you know, I so wanted to hold him in my arms, to tell him I loved him. Oh, I hope no one ever has to endure such pain. Father Ralph turned his face away, to avoid seeing her grief, and to give Fiona time to compose herself, while he could delve deeper into this mysterious woman. No, he said, no one can truly experience and feel your pain. Each person has their own pain, Fiona. She smiled sadly, a twisted smile. That's a comfort too, isn't it, Father? Pain is not something to wish for, but at least this pain is my own. I want you to promise me one thing, Fiona. I will obey you, Father. Take care of Maggie. Don't forget that. Make Maggie attend the local dances, meet young men, encourage her to think about marriage, to build a home of her own. I noticed all the young men, sons of the surrounding farm owners, who came here for the funeral were smitten with her. We need to create more opportunities for Maggie to meet these young men in less solemn circumstances. As you wish, Father. Fiona sighed, then walked out. Fiona remained sitting, gazing at her thin, pale hands as if she saw nothing at all. Ralph was escorted to the horse yard, where the gelding borrowed from the Imperial Hotel owner was eating hay and oats. Ralph slung the old saddle onto the animal's back and bent to tighten the girth, while Maggie stood leaning against a hay bale, watching. Father, look what I found, Maggie said, handing Ralph a pale gray rose just as he straightened up. This is the only rose I found in a hedge by the water tanks behind the house. It survived the heat of the fire and was protected from being crushed by the rain. I picked it for you. Keep it as a memento of me. He took the budding rose, his hands trembling with a lack of confidence as he gazed at the petals. Maggie, I don't need a keepsake from you. Now and forever I carry your whole being within me. You know that yourself, don't you? I can't hide these feelings, can I? But sometimes one needs a tangible memento, something one can touch, she insisted, determined to defend her point. One can look at it and recall what might be forgotten if the memory isn't before one's eyes. Please, Father, take it. Call me Ralph, he said. He bent down, opened a small suitcase containing his liturgical necessities, and took out a Bible with an expensive mother-of-pearl inlay binding, a cherished possession given to him by his late father on the day of his ordination, 13 years ago. He opened the Bible to a page marked by a wide white ribbon, turned a few pages, placed the rose inside, and closed the book. Do you want me to leave you a memento, Maggie? Is that it? Well, I won't leave Maggie anything at all. I want Maggie to look around and choose a kind, decent young man to be her husband someday, and then have children, which Maggie longs for so deeply. Maggie was born to be a mother. Isn't that your dream? I can't leave the church because I couldn't love you as a husband, because I couldn't. Maggie, do you understand me? Forget me. Then won't you kiss me before you say goodbye? In answer, Ralph mounted his horse and rode straight out the gate before settling the old felt hat, also borrowed from the horse owner, on his head. For a moment, Ralph's blue eyes flashed brightly through the rain. The horse trudged along the muddy road leading to Gillenbilla. Maggie could do nothing but watch, still standing in the damp, horse manure and hay-scented darkness of the stables, which reminded her of the shed in New Zealand and Frank. 30 hours after leaving Drogeda, Father Ralph was in the apostolic delegate's office. He crossed the large room to kiss his spiritual father's ring, then sank wearily into an armchair. Only when he felt the beautiful, penetrating eyes fixed on him did Father Ralph realize his unusual attire and understood why so many people had stared at him intently since he stepped off the train at Central Station. Having forgotten his suitcase at the Gillenbilla Presbytery, Father Ralph had jumped onto the express train just 2 minutes before it departed. He had traveled 1,000 kilometers in a cold railway carriage, wearing only a shirt, riding breeches, and boots, all soaking wet, without even realizing it. Father Ralph looked at his clothes, smiled sadly, then turned to the Archbishop. Please forgive me, Your Grace. So many things have happened that I forgot my outlandish attire. You needn't apologize, Ralph. Unlike his predecessor, he preferred to call his private secretary by name. You look quite romantic, even dashing, despite your weariness, though it is somewhat more secular, isn't it? In terms of secularity, I completely agree. But in terms of romance and dashingness, Your Grace, perhaps it's because Your Grace has never seen my usual attire in Gillenbilla. Ralph, my dear, even if you intended to wear Cole Sax's clothes, you wouldn't lose any of your romance and dashingness. Your riding outfit suits you very well indeed, just as your cassock does. Don't bother trying to prove that you don't find this outfit more flattering than your black suit. You have a peculiar and uniquely attractive gait. I believe you will maintain that robust physique forever. I also think that when I am called back to Rome, I will bring you with me. I'm very curious to see what impression you'll make on the portly, short-legged Italian clergy. A beautiful, slender cat among fat, bewildered pigeons. Rome, Father Ralph started. Was what happened painful, Ralph? The Archbishop asked, stroking the sleek back of an Abyssinian cat purring on his lap with his ring-adorned hand. Terribly so, Your Grace. I have a great deal of affection for that family. Yes, you love everyone in that family equally, or some more than others. But Father Ralph was no less cunning than his superior. His long service under him had taught Father Ralph the Archbishop's way of thinking. Father Ralph broke the trap by feigning a frankness sufficient to dispel any doubt in the Archbishop, whose subtle and devious mind failed to realize that an outward frankness was far more deceitful than evasion. I love every member of that family, but as Your Grace said, I love some more than others. For example, Maggie, the daughter whom I love most. I always felt a special responsibility for her because the family consisted entirely of sons and overlooked the daughter's presence. How old is this girl, Maggie? I don't know exactly. Oh, perhaps around 20, something like that. But I did ask her mother to promise to reduce her accounting work so her daughter could attend local dances and have the opportunity to meet many young men her age. Otherwise, her life would be ruined. Being confined to Drogeda like that would be disastrous. Father Ralph was speaking the whole truth. With his particular keen sensitivity, the Archbishop immediately recognized it. Although he was only 3 years older than his private secretary, in many respects, he felt infinitely older than his subordinate. Father Ralph would never age like that. The Vatican had prematurely destroyed the vitality of those it possessed, while Ralph still brimmed with vigor. Relaxing his guard somewhat, the Archbishop continued to observe his private secretary and returned to the intriguing game of trying to discern Ralph's precise motives. Initially, the Archbishop was convinced that there was carnal weakness in this man. In one way or another, the strange beauty of his face, and indeed his physique, must surely have aroused such craving that Father Ralph couldn't have been unaware of it. But over time, His Grace had come to see that his initial impression was only half correct. It was true that Father Ralph also felt his own allure, but that was tied to an undeniable innocence. Whatever the burning fire within Father Ralph, it was certainly not carnal. The Archbishop had arranged for the priest to be near high-ranking homosexuals skilled at attracting anyone with such inclinations, but it yielded no results. He also observed Father Ralph when he was around the country's most beautiful women, but again, no results, not a flicker of interest, no lust in his eyes, even when he didn't know he was being watched. Yes, the Archbishop sometimes used his subordinates to discreetly monitor and truthfully report back. Thus, His Grace began to believe that Father Ralph's weakness lay in his pride as a priest and in his ambition. These were two sides of a personality that, in truth, were not unfamiliar to His Grace, for he found those very aspects within himself. The Church did not lack positions for the ambitious, and like institutions of its stature, it always relied on such loyal and ambitious individuals for its continued existence. Rumors in the world suggested that Father Ralph had usurped the inheritance that rightfully belonged to the Cleary family. Ironically, this was the very family the priest told everyone he loved. If that were true, then Father Ralph was all the more useful. How those beautiful blue eyes had lit up at the mention of Rome. Perhaps it was time to try a new strategic move. The Archbishop feigned nonchalance, making a move in his chess game of conversation with Father Ralph, but in reality, from under his half-closed eyelids, he watched intently. I received news from the Vatican while you were away, Ralph, the Archbishop said, gently moving the cat aside. My little one, you're so selfish, you've made my legs numb. What is it, Your Grace? Father Ralph leaned back in the armchair to see the Archbishop better, trying at the same time to keep his eyelids from drooping from exhaustion after a long journey. Yes, you can go to sleep, but first, I need you to hear this news. Not long ago, I sent a secret message to the Holy Father, and this very morning, I received His Holiness's reply through his representative, Cardinal Montforty, a friend of mine. I always wonder if Montforty belongs to the lineage of the Renaissance composer. I don't know why I always forget to ask him when I meet him. Oh, why do you always extend your claws when you're happy? I'm listening, Your Grace, I'm not sleepy, Father Ralph said with a laugh. It's no surprise that Your Grace loves cats. Your Grace is no different from a cat, enjoying prolonging the pleasure of toying with its prey. Come here, beautiful sherbet. Don't follow that wicked man. Come here to me. The female cat immediately left the archbishop's purple vestments and jumped onto the priest's lap. She lay down, tail wagging, sniffing intently, seemingly enjoying the scent of horse and mud on Father Ralph. Father Ralph's keen blue eyes met the archbishop's, both pairs of eyes half closed, yet both very alert. How did you manage such a feat? The archbishop asked. Sherbet never obeys anyone, yet she ran to you as if invited to eat caviar or some other delicacy. You traitor. I'm still waiting, Your Grace. Are you annoyed by the wait, so you've taken revenge by stealing my cat? Well, you've won, I concede. But tell me, have you ever tasted defeat? That's an interesting question, my dear Ralph. Now, let me offer my congratulations. From now on, you will wear the mitre, the cope, and people will address you as His Excellency, Bishop de Bricquesart. The archbishop delighted in watching Ralph's eyes widen. For the first time, Father Ralph made no attempt to feign or conceal his true feelings. He glowed with natural radiance. The red earth quickly revived with astonishing speed. In just 1 week, green shoots pushed through the muddy layers, and within 2 months, new leaves appeared on the scorched branches. Humans had proven their endurance and resilience. Those who lacked patience could not remain in this vast northwest region, but it would take many years for the scars of the terrible fire to completely disappear. Drogeda lost at least 1/5 of its cultivated land and 25,000 sheep. In truth, this was not a great loss, as in good years, the flock could reach around 125,000 head. However, looking at Drogeda's gardens in spring, still bare and blackened, stung everyone's heart. The people here could survive droughts thanks to Michael Carson's water tanks, but there was nothing to counter fire. The purple pea vines couldn't bloom, the rose bushes were stunted, leaving only thorns, and the petunia flowers also died. Other small plants were no different from withered yellow straw. In shaded areas, the trees still lay sadly prostrate, with no hope of revival. Bob decided to follow in his father's footsteps, strengthening the workforce to maximize the farm's efficiency. He hired 3 additional stockmen. While alive, Mrs. Mary Carson refused to record casual workers in the payroll book, only listing the names of the Cleary family's young men. During busy times, lambing and shearing, she only employed temporary workers. But Paddy, Bob's father, thought and acted differently. He believed that if workers could trust in a specific place to settle down, they would work better. But in the end, the results were not very different. Most stockmen suffered from an inability to stay in one place. Fiona took over her husband's responsibility for correspondence with Bishop Ralph, and true to her nature, she never revealed the contents of the letters to anyone, except solely concerning farm management. Maggie yearned to take them and read them to ease her longing, but Fiona didn't allow her daughter such opportunities. She placed all letters in a small iron safe as soon as her daughter heard new mail had arrived. After Bishop Ralph left, Fiona immediately forgot her promise to the priest. Maggie declined several invitations to dances and receptions. Knowing this, Fiona maintained her old attitude, never encouraging her daughter to end her solitary and dull life. Liam O'Rourke took every opportunity to stop by Drogeda in his car and call frequently. Connor, Carmel, and Alistair McQueen did the same, but to each, Maggie remained distant and unresponsive, leaving them with no hope at all. The telephone rang 2 long rings, one short the signal reserved for Drogeda. Fiona prompted him to answer and turned the phone over to Bob. Hello, Jimmy? Yes, Bob here. Yes, agreed. That's excellent. Does he have good references? Send him over. If he's as good as you say, you can tell him directly that there's a job waiting for him here. I don't put much faith in references, though. All right? Thanks. Goodbye. Bob returned to his seat. It's about a stockman, a really good chap, according to Jimmy. He's worked on the Queensland Plains out west, near Longreach and Charleville. He's also excellent with cattle. He's an outstanding horseman, skilled at breaking horses. Before this, he was a shearer, a real champion at that too, according to Jimmy 250 to 300 sheep a day. I'm just a little surprised why such a champion would be content with a stockman's wages. It's very rare for such a good shearer to put down the clippers and get on a horse. Anyway, he's the kind of man we need in the pastures, isn't he, Mum? With the years, Bob's voice had developed a peculiar drawl, but conversely, he spoke in very short sentences. He was approaching 30, but seemed incapable of winning over the girls he met at the rare receptions held. On one hand, he was very shy. On the other, he was interested in nothing but land and livestock. Jack and Huey grew more and more like their brother. All three also preferred sleeping on the floor, fearing that sleeping in a bed would make them soft. "Has this new worker you mentioned started a family?" Fiona asked, continuing her bookkeeping. "I don't know, I forgot to ask. We'll find out tomorrow when he arrives. How's he getting here?" "Jimmy's bringing him by car. He wants to look over the old ewes at the tank stand. I hope he stays for a while if he's not married. Mother guesses he'll leave again in a few weeks. Workers like that don't stay long, you see." And then there were Stu and Pat, attending school at Riverview, but determined not to stay another day once they turned 14. Both eagerly awaited the day they could follow Bob, Jack, and Huey out to the pastures. Weeks passed before Maggie first encountered the new stockman. His name was Luke O'Neill. He often came to the big house to chat. Luke refused to sleep in the single men's quarters. He chose the small, empty cottage by the creek. As soon as he was introduced to Mrs. Smith, Luke won the housekeeper's affection, though she rarely paid attention to hired hands. This new arrival sparked much curiosity in Maggie before she met him directly. Maggie's chestnut mare and her own horse were kept in the stable, no longer left out in the breaking yard. Consequently, Maggie often started her workday later than the men, sometimes not seeing the workers for weeks on end. But finally, she met Luke one late summer afternoon as the sun, low in the sky, cast a reddish glow on the trees, stretching long shadows before gradually fading into the oblivion of night. Maggie was returning from Boarhead, slowly making her way to the creek crossing. At the same time, Luke was approaching from the southeast. The sun shone directly into Luke's eyes. She saw him before he saw her. Luke was riding a tall, wild chestnut horse. Unlike his colleagues, Luke wore a white shirt and light-colored trousers, looking remarkably refined. "How elegant," Maggie thought to herself. "That's good if he's not afraid of the laundry." "Hello, Mrs." he called out as his horse drew level with hers. He greeted Maggie by tipping his hat, then replaced it. His blue eyes, seemingly dismissive of others, looked at her without concealing his admiration. "Excuse me, you're surely not the Mrs. Perhaps the daughter?" he observed. "My name is Luke O'Neill." Maggie stammered something indistinct, avoiding his gaze, flustered and awkward, unable to find a suitable, normal greeting for the situation. "Oh, how ridiculous. Why is there someone so audacious with eyes and a face so like Father Ralph's?" This similarity didn't hide, in his gaze at Maggie, the humor evident in his nature, nor did his look betray a burning love for her. On the contrary, from the very first moment she met Father Ralph, little Maggie had caught love in the priest's eyes. How could she look at Luke without seeing Ralph's eyes and avoid remembering Ralph? A cruel joke, a punishment completely unaware of the thoughts he had stirred in Maggie's mind. Luke kept his difficult chestnut horse abreast of Maggie's calm mare as they crossed the creek, whose waters flowed fiercely after heavy rains. There was no doubt Maggie had become a truly beautiful young woman. How lovely her hair was! If only she would lift her face so he could fully admire it. But just as Maggie decided to do so, the expression on her face made Luke frown in surprise. It wasn't that Maggie looked at Luke with hatred, but her gaze seemed to search for something hidden or a trait she didn't want to find in Ralph. Maggie was flustered, while Luke was unaccustomed to being scrutinized by women from a passive position. Maggie's reddish-blonde hair glowed in the crimson twilight sky, and her brown eyes were like a trap, waiting for Luke to voluntarily fall into. He watched with amusement her annoyed and disappointed reaction, then calmly continued to observe her. Her mouth was like a blossoming flower, beads of sweat on her lips like dewdrops, and on her forehead too, due to the heat. Her eyelashes curled in surprise. Luke's smile revealed the large, strong teeth of Father Ralph, but the smile itself was not Father Ralph's. You know, you have the innocent, bewildered look of a child, with your mouth round like an O and an E. I apologize, she said, looking away. I didn't mean to stare, you just remind me of someone, that's all. You can look at me as much as you like. It's better than only seeing the top of your head, no matter how beautiful it is. Who do I remind you of? It doesn't matter. Still, it's strange to meet someone for the first time and feel so familiar, yet so different from that person. What's your name, little Cleary girl? Maggie. Maggie? A name that doesn't suit you at all. I prefer you to be called Belinda or Madeline or something. But if Maggie is truly your only possible name, then Maggie it is. What's your pet name? No, not Megan. That sounds better, so I'll call you Megan. No, that won't do, Maggie retorted. I hate that name. Luke laughed. You're too spoiled and used to everyone indulging your whims, little Maggie. But with me, if I want to call you Anastasia, Sharon, Augusta, no one can forbid me. You know that, don't you? They had both arrived at the horse paddock. Luke dismounted, gently delivering a light punch to the head of his horse, which bared its teeth as if to bite him. The animal turned away, standing docilely on the ground. He held out his hand to help Maggie down, but no, Maggie nudged her horse forward and rode straight to the stable. This temperamental chestnut can't be stabled with ordinary horses, Maggie said loudly, without turning back. Oh, how ridiculous. Even standing tall on two legs, he resembled Father Ralph, tall, broad-shouldered, slim-hipped. But the beauty he exuded was somewhat different. Father Ralph moved like a dancer, Luke like an athlete. Yet both had the same blue eyes, and their noses were equally refined and straight, their mouths perfectly sculpted. Perhaps he didn't resemble Father Ralph as much as a tall, beautiful gray eucalyptus resembles an equally tall and beautiful blue eucalyptus. After that chance meeting, Maggie listened to gossip about Luke. Bob and her brothers were pleased with Luke's work and got along well with him. Even Fiona mentioned Luke's name one evening, remarking that he was a handsome young man. Do you think he resembles anyone, Mother? Maggie asked, lying casually on the rug reading a book. Fiona thought for a moment. Yes, I do. He has a resemblance to Bishop de Bricasart. The same build, the same complexion, but not very much. They are very different in temperament, men. Maggie, I want you to sit on a chair like a young lady when you're reading, not to behave like a wild boy just because you're wearing riding breeches. What's wrong with it? Maggie retorted. You act as if someone is watching me. Going down to the kitchen, Maggie discovered that Luke dared to dress so elegantly in his bright shirt and light-colored trousers because he had one over Mrs. Smith. She was the one who laundered Luke's clothes. A week later, meeting Luke again near the creek, Maggie thought Luke had deliberately waited for her there, but she couldn't determine his attitude if her suspicion was true. Hello, Megan. Hello, Maggie replied, looking directly at the chestnut horse's ears. There's a dance at Bread's sheep shearing camp next Saturday. Would you like to go with me? Thank you, you've invited me, but unfortunately I don't know how to dance, so I won't be attending. I'll teach you a few steps, that's all. That's not an obstacle. If I take the boss's sister to the dance, Bob will lend me the Rolls-Royce, and who knows, maybe even the new car. I told you I'm not going, Maggie replied, her teeth clenched. You told me you don't know how to dance, and I told you I'd teach you. You never said you wouldn't go with me if you knew how to dance. That makes me think that not knowing how to dance is the obstacle, not me personally. Or do you just want to go there to put on a show? Annoyed, Maggie glared at Luke, but Luke remained calm and laughed loudly. You're too spoiled and naughty, little Megan. It's time people stopped indulging your temperamental whims. You're not one of the favorites. You should reconsider. The only daughter among brothers, all of whom adore you. Besides, all this land, money, luxurious house, numerous servants I know. The owner of this estate is the church, but the Cleary family isn't without money. Now I see the difference between the two men, Maggie thought triumphantly. This thought had never occurred to her since she met Luke. Father Ralph never paid attention to appearances. Luke lacked Ralph's sensitivity and couldn't perceive what was hidden beneath the surface. Indeed, Luke passed through life like a horseman viewing flowers, seeing neither complexity nor suffering. Completely unexpectedly, Bob handed Luke the keys to the new Rolls-Royce without another word. He just watched Luke intently, then smiled. I can't imagine Maggie going to a dance, but please take my sister, and I wish you both a very pleasant evening. Perhaps my sister will enjoy it very much. Poor girl, she rarely has a chance to leave the house. We really should have found ways to entertain Maggie, but everyone is too busy. Why don't you go with Jack and Huey? Luke asked, indicating he wasn't against more people coming along. No, thank you, we don't like dancing. Maggie wore her dusty pink dress. She had no other dress. It had never occurred to Maggie to use the money Father Ralph had deposited in the bank for her to buy clothes. Until now, Maggie had always refused invitations from men like Davis and Alistair McQueen. None of them had Luke O'Neill's unwavering confidence. But looking in the mirror, Maggie thought to herself, I'll go with Mother to Gillenbilla next week and stop by old Mrs. Old Girl to order a few new dresses. In truth, Maggie didn't want to wear this dress. If she had another, she would have changed immediately. This dress reminded her of a past time, another dark-haired man. This dress had become entirely intertwined with Maggie's initial love and dreams, with the tears and pain of loneliness. Wearing it to go out with another man like Luke was a desecration of the most sacred. Maggie was accustomed to hiding her feelings, always maintaining a calm and cheerful demeanor. She thought of her mother and couldn't help but shiver with pity. Would Maggie's life also end like her mother's, always withdrawn, never revealing her emotions? Had everything started with her mother after she met Frank's grandmother? How would her mother react if she knew Maggie had learned the whole truth about Frank? Oh, what happened at the presbytery seemed like it had just happened last night. Her father and Frank confronted each other, and Ralph had held Maggie so tightly that she cried out in pain. Maggie still remembered the terrible words they had both shouted. Maggie was old enough to understand that having a child, as her mother did, carried many consequences, unlike before when she only thought that once married, carnal relations with others were strictly forbidden. Maggie had borne the shame and humiliation because of Frank. No wonder her mother had isolated herself afterwards. If that happened to me, Maggie thought to herself, I would choose death. In novels, only the worst, most wicked girls had illegitimate children, but her mother was not like that, neither wicked nor common. With all her heart, Maggie wished her mother would tell her the story, or that she herself would have the courage to bring up the subject, hoping it might help her mother, even if only a little. But sadly, Fiona was not the kind of person to confide in or initiate intimate conversations. Standing before the mirror, Maggie sighed, wishing with all her heart that such a misfortune would not befall her. Yet Maggie was still young. At such a moment, wearing the dusty pink dress, looking at herself in the mirror, she longed to live with feelings and embrace emotions as torrential as a strong, hot wind. Maggie didn't want to drag out the rest of her life like a machine, but wanted changelove with a husband and children. Why grieve for someone who would no longer come to her? Ralph didn't want to come and would never come. Ralph told Maggie that his love wasn't like a husband's because Ralph was married to the church. Were all men like that? Did they love a vague concept more than they could love a woman? Was there any guarantee that all men weren't like that? But still, there were simpler men, men who dared to place their love for a woman above all else. Men like Luke, for example. I've never met a girl as beautiful as you, Luke said, starting the Rolls-Royce. How old are you, Luke? 30, and you almost 20. That old, you look like a little girl. I'm not little anymore. Oh, then have you ever been in love? Once. Only once. My heavens, at your age, I'd been in love a dozen times at least. I could have been too, but there are very few men in Drogeda who could stir my heart. If my memory serves me well, you're the first man on this ranch to dare to go beyond a timid greeting. The dance that evening, which Maggie attended with Luke, was not like the kind Maggie had witnessed at Mary Carson's birthday. Here, there were only proper group dances like polkas and mazurkas. Men's hands only brushed lightly in social contact, while in swift waltzes, the arms were robust. There was no opportunity for intimate interaction or for dreaming. Maggie soon realized that her tall and handsome companion attracted the attention of many girls. Luke was the object of adoring and seductive gazes, almost as much as Ralph, but more openly. Luke also evoked as much attention as Ralph had once evoked. It was terrible to speak of Ralph in the past tense. As Luke had promised, he did not leave Maggie alone during the event, except when she needed to go to the ladies' room. He gave no opportunity for the young men from neighboring areas to cut in. The final music was a waltz. Luke took Maggie's hand, his other arm around her waist, pulling her close. Luke was an excellent dancer. Maggie was surprised to realize that everything became easy, she just had to let Luke lead. It felt wonderful to be pressed against him, to feel the solid flesh of his chest and thighs, and to absorb the man's body heat. The brief touches with Father Ralph had generated a burning intensity that made Maggie unable to perceive the subtle reactions in her skin, and at that time, she honestly thought she would never feel such a sensation in another man's arms. Yet, the reality that just occurred was very different. Her whole body was stimulated, her heart rate quickened, and Maggie knew that Luke recognized the change in her, so he held her tighter, pressing his cheek against her hair. They said almost nothing on the 100-kilometer drive from Bread's camp back to Drogeda. As they approached the house, Luke stopped the car, got out, walked around to the other side, and helped Maggie alight. Slightly trembling, Maggie wondered if everything would be ruined if Luke tried to kiss her. But in the absolute silence of the night, Luke made no move towards her. Turning his back to the darkness, Luke took out a packet of tobacco and papers, then rolled a cigarette. "Were you born here, Megan?" Luke asked, brushing away the strands of tobacco clinging to his palm. "No, I was born in New Zealand. My family came to Drogeda 13 years ago." "Did you have fun tonight?" "Oh, a lot of fun. I'd love to take you to other dances." Then Luke fell silent again. He slowly drew on his cigarette, his eyes scanning the car's bonnet towards a clump of trees where a bird let out a disturbed cry, its sleep abruptly interrupted. When the cigarette was finished, Luke flicked it to the ground and pressed his heel down repeatedly until he was sure it was extinguished. No one knew how to crush a cigarette butt like a man accustomed to life in the Australian bush. With a sigh, Maggie seemed to stop gazing at the moon, and Luke helped her back into the car. Luke was very cautious and did not kiss Maggie at this moment. Moreover, he had already intended to prepare a whole plan to marry her. First, however, he had to wait for Maggie herself to desire it. After that, throughout the summer, there were other dances, and gradually, everyone on the farm grew accustomed to Maggie being escorted by a suitable young man. Maggie's brothers refrained from teasing, for they all loved Maggie and felt a fondness for Luke, the tireless worker. Before long, Luke made it a habit to go straight to the big house when he wasn't sleeping out in the pastures. Bob quickly declared that letting Luke eat alone while the Cleary family table had plenty was improper. Later, it seemed truly absurd for Luke, after staying up talking with Maggie every night, to have to walk an additional kilometer and a half back to his quarters. So the whole family suggested Luke move into one of the small guest cottages located directly behind the main house. At this time, Maggie began to think about Luke more, but with less torment than before when she thought of Ralph. The wound in her heart was slowly healing. She gradually forgot that although the two men had similar mouths, Ralph's smile was distinctly different. Ralph's lively blue eyes held a serene aloofness, while Luke's eyes blazed with passionate storms. Maggie was young and had not yet tasted the flavor of love. Even in fleeting moments, she longed to taste its sweetness on her tongue, to inhale it into her lungs like a flower, and to drink it until she was intoxicated. Father Ralph, who had become Bishop Ralph, would never return to her. Ralph had sold Maggie for £13,000, leaving a deep resentment in her heart. If Ralph had not uttered that statement on the night at Boarhead Pasture, Maggie would not have questioned it. But Ralph had used those words, and ever since, for many nights, Maggie couldn't sleep, wondering about their true meaning. When she placed her palm on Luke's back on the night of the dance, her whole being felt uncomfortably lightheaded because of this man, because of his touch and his captivating vitality. But Maggie did not feel that strange, thrumming fire penetrating her very bones. Even when she was away from Luke and thought of him, Maggie didn't imagine she would feel withered and faded if she never saw him again. Luke was both clever and arrogant, working very hard and longing to get rich. But a life spent toiling as a shearer taught him that he couldn't get rich that way. At this point, Luke discovered his charm with women. He first tried his luck as a stockman at Gullarunga, where the heiress to the ranch was a relatively young and beautiful woman. It was only due to his bad luck that the female owner eventually chose another man. From Gullarunga, Luke went to Bingara. There, he was hired as a horsebreaker. Luke immediately noticed the older daughter, who, although not favored by the owner, was the official heir to the property. He almost won her over, but in the end, she listened to her father and married a 60-year-old, still dapper, neighboring ranch owner. These 2 attempts at fortune cost Luke over 3 years of his life, and he considered the 20 months spent on each heiress too long and tedious. At one point, he thought he should travel far, constantly changing his surroundings, expanding his horizons until he found a truly remarkable prize. So Luke indulged in pleasure, traveling all over the stock routes of western Queensland, then drifting along the Cooper and Diamantina, Barcoo and Bulu overflow rivers, all the way into western New South Wales. Now he was 30. It was time to find a hen that could lay golden eggs. Everyone was talking about Drogeda. Luke, on his own, found out that there was only one daughter on the ranch. He didn't expect her to be the heiress, but who knew, the family might give her a dowry of around 40,000 hectares of land in the Canuna or Winton region. The Gillenbilla area was pleasant, but too crowded, and had too many kinds of trees that he didn't like. Luke dreamed of the vastness of western Queensland, where grass stretched as far as the eye could see, with no trees, just grass and grass. There was no beginning and no end. There, owners could freely graze 1 sheep per 4 hectares, even though his goal was 40,000 hectares in the Canuna or Winton region. This goal had become an obsession for Luke, but in truth, money was what he loved most, more than anything it could bring. Owning land and power did not appeal to Luke as much as the rows of numbers on a checkbook bearing the name Luke O'Neill. If he were truly passionate about becoming a ranch owner, Luke would never have set his sights on Maggie Cleary, the daughter who didn't own an inch of land. For the 13th time in 10 consecutive weeks, Luke took Maggie to a dance, this time organized by Holy Cross School in Gillenbilla. Every Saturday, Luke borrowed Bob's Rolls-Royce keys and drove Maggie 200 kilometers from Drogeda. That evening, it was cold and moonless. Maggie leaned against the fence, away from the house, gazing at the landscape. Beneath her feet, she heard the crunch of frozen snow. Winter had arrived. Luke's arm went around Maggie's shoulder, pulling her close. "You're cold," Luke observed. "We should get in the car and go back." "It's all right, I feel better now. I've warmed up," Maggie replied, her breath quickening. Maggie noticed a change in Luke as he pressed his arm harder. Although the gesture seemed unintentional, it felt wonderfully good to be pressed against Luke, absorbing the warmth radiating from a man's muscular body. Even through his thick Sunday coat, Maggie could clearly feel Luke's fingers tracing deliberate, caressing circles, trying to elicit a response from her. At this point, if Maggie had said she was cold, Luke would have stopped. If Maggie remained silent, Luke would take it as consent. Maggie was young and yearned to experience love. Luke was the first man besides Ralph to catch her attention, so why refuse the taste of kisses? Assuming Maggie's silence meant consent, Luke placed his hand on Maggie's shoulder, turning her to face him. Luke placed his lips on Maggie's. Maggie's lips moved slightly, a sign of acceptance. Luke pressed his mouth harder. Maggie's lips parted, disgust. At that very moment, Maggie realized that, for some reason, the sensation she was experiencing was vastly different from when Ralph had kissed her. At that time, Maggie had never felt such disgust, almost nausea, instantly. An emptiness consumed Maggie's soul. Her lips had opened to receive Luke's kiss, no different from an iron door swinging open when the secret spring was pressed. What strange way had Luke acted to make her whole body tremble like this, making Maggie cling tightly to him while desperately trying to break free from his arms? Luke discovered Maggie's sensitive spot, which would make her lose her ability to resist. Luke's fingers pressed down on Maggie's lower side, sending an electric current through her. Until then, she had not responded with passion. Luke no longer kissed Maggie's lips but placed his mouth on her soft neck. She seemed to enjoy this contact, her breath quickening, her hands clinging to Luke's muscular shoulders. But when Luke lowered his lips towards her chest, Maggie abruptly pushed him away. "That's enough, Luke." The abrupt ending was disappointing. Feeling somewhat offended, Luke also recognized it. As he helped Maggie back into the car, he paused to roll a cigarette, his mind wandering. He still considered himself a skilled lover, a conqueror. Until now, his conquests had never been met with such resistance. It must be said that, apart from his physique, Luke had no more sexual experience than an average rural laborer. He understood almost nothing about women's subtle reactions, and besides, what he personally enjoyed was largely theoretical. For Maggie, Luke told himself, he had to be extremely careful, not allowing himself to frighten or disgust her. Pleasure simply had to be postponed. He had to win Maggie over with flowers and attentive care, not with roughness. The two were silent for a moment, then Maggie sighed, leaning back in the car seat. "I'm sorry, Luke." "Me too. I deeply regret what happened. I had no intention of offending you." "Oh no, you didn't offend me. No, really, it's just that I'm not very used to that kind of thing. You scared me, not offended me, Megan," Luke exclaimed, letting go of the steering wheel. He took Maggie's hands, which were resting on her knees. "Listen, don't dwell on it anymore. Let's forget it." "Yes, let's forget it," Maggie agreed. "He never kissed you, did he?" Luke asked, curious. In Maggie's question, there seemed to be anxiety. But why such anxiety? "You told me you'd been in love, so I assumed you understood a little about." "Well, I deeply regret it, Megan. I really should have understood that living in such isolation, in a family like the Clearys, the story you told me was nothing more than a childish crush, perhaps even one that the young man didn't even notice." Yes, Luke, you should see it that way. You're absolutely right, Luke. It was just a childish crush." When they arrived home, Luke kissed Maggie again, but this time he kissed her gently, merely placing his lips on hers. Maggie did not resist, showing her acquiescence. He returned to the small guest cottage, content in the thought that he had not extinguished his hopes. The second time Luke kissed Maggie, she had a completely different attitude. They attended a reception at Rudna Hunit. It was cold, and the road back was long. Luke had secretly brought some sandwiches and a bottle of champagne in the car. After driving 2/3 of the way, Luke stopped the car. In Australia at that time, very few cars had heaters, but the Rolls-Royce did. "It's really pleasant on a cold night like this to sit in the car without needing a coat," Maggie remarked with a smile. The Rolls-Royce engine purred steadily, like an animal's growl, in the silence of the vast landscape, while inside, the warmth radiated steadily, sounding like a sigh. Two very different sounds, but both soothing. Luke loosened his tie, unbuttoned the top button of his shirt. Suddenly, Luke turned and wrapped his arms around her. Maggie still felt tightly bound to Luke. She did not resist, allowing Luke to pull her close against his chest. This time, Luke didn't rush things. His lips were like butterflies, landing on her soft cheeks, then resting on her closed eyes, gently brushing her eyelashes for a long time, then returning to a light on the childlike mouth that had driven Luke crazy at their very first meeting. Then to her neck, then the smooth, fresh skin of her shoulders, and Luke couldn't stop. But in Luke's mind, he still feared Maggie's resistance. His fingers began to assault the row of buttons down the back of Maggie's dress. When Luke sat up, neatly pulling his braces back onto his shoulders and quickly buttoning up Maggie's back, he said, "I think we should get married, Megan. Your brothers won't approve at all of what we just did." "Yes, I think so too," Maggie agreed, looking down, her cheeks flushed. "So we'll inform them tomorrow morning. Why not as soon as possible? Next Saturday, I'll drive you to Yule. We'll go see Father Thomas. I'm sure you'd like to have the ceremony in a church." No one was very surprised by the news, nor did anyone think to object to the marriage. The only surprise for the family was Maggie's resolute refusal to write to Bishop Ralph to inform him of the news and her almost frantic reaction when Bob suggested inviting Father Ralph to the wedding. "No, no, no," Maggie shrieked. Maggie had never raised her voice before. Fiona promised not to mention a word of it in her correspondence with Bishop Ralph. She didn't seem to care much about it, or even about Maggie choosing a husband. The bookkeeping for a large ranch like Drogeda occupied almost all her time. What she recorded in her notebook could provide any historian with a typical picture of life on an Australian sheep station. Sunday, July 22, 1934 was recorded in her notebook as follows: "Clear sky. Early morning temperature 1 degree. No church today. Bob at home. Jack went to Mimosa with 2 workers. Huey went to West Dam with 1 worker. Beer Barrel took 3-year-old sheep from Bingara to Winton. Temperature rose to 29 degrees at 3 p.m. Barometer stable, 77.7 west wind." Dinner menu: minced meat, boiled potatoes, carrots, and plum pudding with cream. Little Megan Cleary will marry Luke O'Neill, a stockman, on Saturday, August 25 at Holy Cross Church in Gillenbilla. Noted at 9 p.m. Temperature 7 degrees. Quarter moon. After all the wedding preparations were complete, Luke said to his fiancée, "My dear, I've figured out where we'll spend our honeymoon." "Where then?" "In northern Queensland. While you were at the dressmaker's, I spoke with a few blokes at the Imperial pub. They told me that in that sugarcane country, it's easy to make money for a strong man who isn't afraid of hard work. But you already have a good job here. A self-respecting man can't live off his wife's family. I want us to earn a lot of money to buy a piece of land in Queensland. I want that to happen before I'm too old to even think about it. Without an education, it's hard to find a good position in society, especially in the current crisis. But in Queensland, there's a shortage of labor. I'll make 10 times more money there than here at Drogeda. How? Cutting sugarcane. Cutting sugarcane, that's coolie work. No, you're wrong. Coolies are too small to achieve the productivity of white workers, and you know very well that Australian law doesn't allow black and yellow immigrants to come here seeking work for lower wages than ours. People fear they'll take Australian jobs. There's a shortage of sugarcane cutters now, so there's a lot of money to be made in this work. Very few men are big and strong enough to do it. I am strong enough. Do you mean we'll live in North Queensland permanently? Maggie looked through the window at Drogeda tall eucalyptus trees, the distant sheep pastures, and the forests. So, we won't live at Drogeda anymore. That means we'll be somewhere Bishop Ralph will never find us. So, I'll never see Ralph again, and I'll tie my life to a stranger sitting before me. Is there no way back to the past? Maggie's eyes showed an unconcealed sadness, but Luke paid no attention. No woman, no matter how gentle and beautiful like Maggie Cleary, could sway him. Full of self-confidence, Luke went straight to the point. There were times when subtlety and cunning were needed, but in this case, he believed bluntness was more effective. Megan, I'm a bit old-fashioned, aren't I? Maggie looked at Luke curiously. Maggie's counter-question implied, but what's wrong with that? That's right, Luke continued. In my opinion, after marriage, all of a wife's property belongs to her husband, just like the dowry of old. I know you have a little money, so I felt it was necessary to get married right away. After we officially live together, you'll sign the necessary papers. Your money belongs to me. I think telling you my intentions beforehand is more straightforward. You still have time to freely accept or refuse. In her mind, Maggie had never considered keeping the money to herself. She still thought that once she became Luke's wife, she would hand everything over to her husband. Most Australian girls were like that, except for a few who had been influenced by a more refined education. The majority regarded themselves as their husband's slaves, like serfs to a lord or master. Fiona and the children had always depended on Patty, and since her husband's death, Fiona had transferred authority to Bob, the successor. The man owned the money, the wife, and the children. Maggie never intended to challenge that. I didn't know signing papers was necessary, Luke recounted. I just thought everything you owned naturally became mine after the wedding. That used to be true, but those foolish politicians in Canberra changed everything when they recognized women's right to vote. I want everything to be clear and in order between us, Megan. That's why I want you to know exactly how things will be right now. But I don't see any inconvenience, Luke, Maggie said with a smile. How much money do you have? £14,000 in total right now. Plus, I receive another £2,000 annually. Luke gasped. £14,000? That's a lot of money, Megan. You're right, I should manage this money. Next week we'll go see the bank manager, and you can tell him that from now on, all money transferred to your account must be transferred directly into my name. You know, I won't touch a single penny of that savings. It will help us buy a farm later. In the coming years, we'll both work hard and save every penny we earn. Agreed. Yes, Luke, Maggie agreed. After the wedding, Maggie became Mrs. Luke O'Neill, and they both set off for North Queensland. The journey was exhausting. The first leg to Gundywindy was by train, packed with people, no sleeping berths. The next leg to Cardwell had sleeping berths, but Luke bought second-class sitting tickets, making Maggie exclaim, "Luke, we have money. If you forgot to go to the bank to get money, I have £100 ready in my purse money Bob gave me. Why didn't you reserve first-class berths?" Luke stared at Maggie, astonishment clearly visible on his face. But the journey to Dunglow is only 3 days. Why waste money buying a sleeping berth when both of us are young and healthy? Sitting on a train for a few days won't kill us, Megan. Anyway, it's time you understood that you've married an ordinary working man, not some rich, obnoxious colonialist. Slumping into the window seat, utterly exhausted, chin in hand, Maggie looked out the window, trying to prevent Luke from noticing the tears welling up, about to spill. Maggie's heart felt rebellious, or rather, a defiant thought stirred within her. However, pride and stubbornness prevented Maggie from entering into an undignified argument. Throughout the journey, Maggie had a terrible headache and couldn't eat anything. The heat was scorching, a heat she had never experienced in Gillenbilla. Her pretty pink silk wedding dress was now smudged with black soot and dust from the window. At Cardwell, they disembarked. Luke quickly went to an O's Fish and Chips shop opposite the station. He returned with 2 greasy fried fish fillets wrapped in newspaper. If you haven't tasted Cardwell fish, you can't imagine how delicious it is, my dear Megan. The fish here is the best in the world. Try it and tell me what you think. Maggie glanced at the greasy fish, then immediately covered her mouth with her handkerchief and rushed to the restroom. Luke followed, waited in the hallway for a moment, then she emerged, pale and trembling. "What's wrong, dear?" "I don't feel well. I haven't felt well since we left Gundywindy Station." By evening, when the train reached Dunglow, Maggie barely had the strength to walk normally, but out of pride, she still hid it from Luke. Maggie followed Luke like a drunkard. He asked the station master to recommend a hotel for workers. The hotel room was narrow, the furniture gaudy, but to Megan at this moment, it was better than heaven. Without changing, Maggie collapsed onto the bed. "You should rest a bit before dinner. I'll go out and see what it's like here." Maggie drifted into a weary sleep, still hearing the sound of iron wheels rolling down the long road and the bed swaying in rhythm with the train. Someone had taken off her shoes and socks before covering her with the sheet. She stretched, opened her eyes, and looked around. Luke sat by the window, one leg drawn up, smoking. Hearing his wife stir, he turned and smiled. "Well, my dear, you play the role of a newlywed very charmingly. While I was impatiently waiting to start our honeymoon, my wife slept for 2 whole days. At first, I was a bit worried because I couldn't wake you, but the hotel owner explained that many women sleep like that after a train journey in this humid climate. How do you feel now?" "I feel better, thank you. Granted, I'm young and healthy, but I'm still a woman. My endurance is still less than yours, isn't it?" Luke came and sat on the edge of the bed, stroking Maggie's hand, showing remorse. "I'm sorry, dear. I forgot you're a woman. You see, I'm not used to my role as a husband yet. That's all. Are you hungry?" "I'm starving. I haven't eaten anything for almost a week." Luke took her to the Chinese restaurant next to the hotel. Everything tasted delicious. After eating, Luke took Maggie's hand and led her for a walk all over Dunglow, as if the city belonged to him. That manner was also reasonable, as Queensland was Luke's home state. On the streets of Dunglow, there were many Chinese people, men and women dressed almost identically, making it very difficult for Maggie to distinguish them. Nearly all commercial activity was in the hands of the Chinese. The largest and most complete store was named A Quox. Most shops were also Chinese-owned. Bicycles were everywhere, hundreds of them. There were very few cars and absolutely no horses, unlike in Gillenbilla. Dunglow was completely different from the towns in the west. It was very hot here, intensely hot. Although it was only around 32 degrees Celsius in Gillenbilla, the temperature sometimes reached 46 degrees, but the air felt more pleasant. "Oh, Luke, I'm too tired. I can't take it anymore. Let's go back to the hotel," Maggie said, panting, though she had walked no more than a kilometer. "As you wish, dear. It's the humid air that's making you tired. It rains all year round here. It's hard to distinguish one season from another. Temperatures range between 29 and 35 degrees. Back at the hotel, Luke opened the door to their room, then stepped aside for Maggie to enter alone. He went downstairs to the bar for a beer. "I'll be back in half an hour. That should give you enough time to get ready." "Yes, Luke," she said, looking at Luke with a startled expression. When Luke returned to the room, Maggie had turned off the light and pulled the sheet up to her chin. Luke couldn't help but laugh, pulling the sheet off Maggie and throwing it to the floor. "It's hot enough in here, my dear. We don't need this sheet." Maggie heard Luke's footsteps in the room and saw his silhouette as he undressed. "I left your pajamas on the dressing table," Maggie whispered. "Pajamas? It's too hot to wear pajamas. I know they judge everything in Gillenbilla if a man doesn't wear clothes to bed, but we're in Dunglow, my dear. Are you wearing a nightgown?" "Yes." "Then throw it off. It'll just get in our way." Fumbling in the dark, Maggie finally removed the thin lawn nightgown that Mrs. Smith, out of affection for Maggie, had lovingly embroidered with the intention of her wearing it on her wedding night. Maggie prayed in the dark that Luke wouldn't see her clearly. Luke's guess was not wrong. Maggie felt more comfortable and refreshed lying on the bed, without any fabric clinging to her body, letting the gentle breeze from the small open windows caress her smooth skin. But when Maggie imagined another hot, sweating body lying next to her, she felt disheartened. The bed springs creaked. Maggie felt a sweaty flesh touch her arm, making her jump. Luke rolled over, wrapping his arm around Maggie. At first, she didn't agree but remained still. Yet, when she thought of Luke's mouth, his vulgar, tonguey kiss, Maggie struggled, trying to break free from Luke's embrace. She didn't want contact in this heat. She didn't want to be embraced, and she didn't want Luke. The events of this night were nothing like the night in the Rolls-Royce when they returned from Rudna. Maggie felt no tenderness from Luke. One of Luke's powerful body parts was pushing hard, forcing Maggie's thighs apart, while a hand with unclipped fingernails dug deep into her bottom. Her initial surprise turned into fear. Luke didn't care what she thought or how she felt at that moment. Then suddenly, he let go of Maggie, sat up, fumbled around, and found something to pull out, creating a strange sound. "It's better to be prepared," he panted. "Lie on your back, why are you so resistant?" No, Luke, I don't want to," she wanted to scream. "It's horrible, vulgar." At one point, although she was exhausted and scared to the point of losing her senses, Maggie still had to shriek, a piercing sound. "Be quiet," Luke ordered. "What's wrong? Do you want to cause a commotion in this whole hotel, making everyone misunderstand that I'm trying to kill you? Lie still. This won't hurt you any more than it hurts others. Lie still. I'm telling you, lie still." Maggie struggled like someone possessed, trying to shake off the terrible thing that was causing her pain, but with the full weight of his body, Luke pinned her down, unable to move, and used his hand to prevent Maggie from crying out. After a very long time, Luke finally released her, rolling to one side, lying still, breathing heavily. "Next time, you'll enjoy it more," Luke said between gasps. "The first time is always like that. It's very painful for a woman, but then the second and third times too." Luke looked surprised, not understanding why she was still struggling and screaming, thinking that after the first time the pain would naturally disappear. Finally, Luke got angry, turned his back, and closed his eyes to sleep. Maggie felt tears stream down her cheeks, mingling with her hair. Lying on her back, staring at the ceiling, she wished she could die, or at least return to her old life at Drogeda. "I found a job for you," Luke told Maggie at breakfast. "A job for me, before we find a house to rent? What's the point of a house? It's useless. I'm going to cut sugarcane, everything will be fine." The best sugarcane cutting crew in Queensland consists of Swedes, Poles, and Irishmen, led by a man named Arne Swenson. While you were sleeping, I met him. His crew is short one man, and he's willing to take me on for £20 a week. That's not a small sum, is it? Are you saying we won't live together in the same place? It's impossible, Maggie. Women aren't allowed in the men's camps. And what would you do at home alone? It's better if you also work. All the money we earn will go towards buying a farm. But where will you stay? What kind of work will you do? There's no livestock here like at Drogeda. No, that's why I found a place where you can live and work, and I won't have to pay for it. You'll work at Himmelhag as a maid for the Ludwig Muller family. He's one of the biggest sugarcane planters in the area, and his wife is disabled. She can't clean the house. I'll take you there tomorrow morning if that's your choice. Maggie looked down at her purse. Did you take my £100, Luke? You deposited it all in the bank. Would I really go out carrying such a large sum of money, Megan? But that means you've taken every last penny from me. Anyway, I need a little money for petty expenses, don't I? Good heavens, what do you need money for? Starting tomorrow morning, you'll be at Himmelhag, and you won't have any opportunity to spend money. I'll take care of the hotel bill now. It's time you understood that you've married a real working man, not a rich colonialist with money to throw out the window. All the monthly money you earn, Muller won't pay directly to you, but will transfer it to an account in my name at the bank. I'll also deposit all the money I earn into the bank. I won't spend a single penny on myself. You know that. We both won't touch it because that money is our future. It's our farm, agreed. Yes, Luke, Maggie agreed. You're very reasonable, Luke, but what if I have a child? At first, Luke intended to tell Maggie that there would truly be no children before they bought the farm, but Maggie was looking up at Luke, making him turn away. "We'll deal with that when it happens. I want us to wait to have children until we've bought the farm. No house, no money, no children, practically no husband either." Maggie suddenly laughed loudly. Luke also raised his teacup, toasting. "Bravo, my English rose." 4 weeks passed before Maggie saw Luke again. Every Sunday morning, Maggie dressed neatly in her pretty pink silk dress, waiting for her husband, who never came. Mr. Muller and Anne, his wife, remained silent, not a word of comment. Of course, Maggie was disgusted recalling the 2 nights at the Dunglow Hotel, but at least then she had him by her side. She regretted why she had screamed like that. She should have bitten her tongue and remained silent, but there was no turning back now. Maggie's pain and moaning had displeased Luke and caused him to distance himself. Luke's indifferent attitude towards Maggie's pain at the time greatly annoyed her, but now, remembering her own behavior, she couldn't help but regret it and ultimately blamed herself. On the 4th Sunday, not dressed for work in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing shorts and a short top while preparing a hot breakfast for Ludwig and Anne, the 2 of them accepted Maggie dressing like that. Once a week, Maggie heard footsteps coming up the stairs next to the kitchen. She left the eggs frying in the pan. She stared for a moment at the tall, hairy figure standing in the doorway. "Luke, is that Luke?" He seemed like a statue carved from marble, not a human being. But Luke walked past the kitchen, gave Maggie a loud kiss on the cheek, then pulled up a chair and sat at the table. Maggie returned to fry more eggs, adding a few slices of bacon to the pan. Anne Muller entered, smiling kindly but inwardly furious. "Where has this scoundrel been, neglecting his wife for so many days? I'm delighted to see you haven't forgotten you have a wife. Please, join us on the veranda for breakfast." Ludwig Muller, born in Australia but of German descent, and his wife both had affection for Maggie and considered themselves very lucky to have Maggie helping them. The husband was very grateful to Maggie, noticing that his wife had cheered up considerably since the golden, shimmering hair had appeared in their house. "How's the sugarcane cutting, Luke?" he asked, sharing the eggs. "If I told you I really liked it, would you believe me?" Ludwig's sharp gaze fixed on Luke's handsome face. "Yes, you're the type whose physique and temperament are suited to that kind of work. This type of labor gives you a sense of being better than others." Anne said, "You know, I was starting to think you'd never come to see Maggie again." "To be honest, Arn and I have decided to work through Sunday this week. Tomorrow we're going to Engam, so Maggie won't see me much." Maggie understands everything. This situation will only last a few years, and besides, we'll have a break in the summer. Arn told me that at that time, he could introduce me to a job at the sugar mill in Sydney, and I could take Maggie there. "What compels you to work so hard, Luke?" Anne asked. "I need to save enough money to buy a farm in the west, in the Canoona region. Didn't Maggie tell you about our plans?" After breakfast, Luke helped Maggie wash the dishes, then took his wife for a walk in the nearest sugar cane field. He talked endlessly about sugar cane, about his excellent cane cutting work, about the interesting outdoor life, and about his wonderful comrades in Arn's crew. This work was completely different from sheep shearing. When they returned to the house, Maggie asked Luke, "Do you think this house is beautiful? Do you think we could rent our own house after 2 years of living here?" "I long to care for a home, as I've cared for this one." "Why do you have such a crazy idea about living alone in a house? We're not in Gillenbilla. This isn't a place where a woman can safely stay home alone. Aren't you happy here, Megan? You should be content with what you have for now, until we can go west. We definitely can't waste money renting a house. I can't let you live a life of idleness when we need to save. Do you hear me?" "Yes, Luke." Luke was so hurried that he forgot his initial intention to take his wife downstairs, under the raised house, to embrace her. In the end, Luke said goodbye to Maggie by giving her a rather hard slap on her bottom, which hurt her, then followed the path down to where he had left his bicycle leaning against a tree. He cycled the 30 kilometers here, absolutely refusing to spend money on a bus ticket. "Poor girl," Anne said to her husband. "I want to kill that monstrous husband of hers." Days passed, a year, then 2. Only the unchanging kindness of the Muller family kept Maggie at Himmelhog, amidst a predicament she didn't know how to resolve. A letter to Bob would immediately bring Maggie money to return home, but poor Maggie couldn't bring herself to confess to her family that Luke hadn't left her a penny. If one day she decided, that would be the day Maggie left Luke forever. But for now, it wasn't ripe for that solution. Her family upbringing taught Maggie that marriage was sacred, and she hoped that one day, her need for motherhood and Luke's position as a proper husband would compel Maggie to stay. She met Luke a total of 6 times in 18 months away from home. Many times Maggie thought Luke was living homosexually with Arn, like husband and wife. Once a month, fulfilling her duty, Maggie wrote to her mother and brothers, recounting a few lines about North Queensland. The stories were not without humor, but resolutely avoided any mention of her conflicts with Luke. The Mullers were spoken of as Luke's friends. Maggie lived with the Mullers because Luke was often away working. Occasionally, Maggie summoned the courage to ask a vague question about Bishop Ralph, but often Bob would forget to write back to his sister any news that Fiona knew about the bishop. Suddenly, one day, Maggie received a long letter from Bob, mentioning Ralph at length. One day he arrived as if from the sky. He was a bit flustered, seemed sad, and was utterly astonished not to find you. He was furious that no one in the family had told him about Luke and you. But when Mother explained to him that it was all due to your stubbornness and that you yourself had refused to let him know about the wedding, he immediately calmed down and said no more. But I had the feeling that your absence from the house left him feeling emptier than anyone else's absence. He thought that was normal, of course, because you were closest to him and he always regarded you as his sister. He wandered everywhere like a sorrowful, restless spirit. He seemed to expect you to suddenly appear at every turn of the road he took. Poor man, there wasn't a single photo of you in the house to show him. Only when he asked for wedding photos did I realize I hadn't taken any. He asked if you had children yet. I replied that it seemed not. You don't have children yet, do you, Maggie? How long have you been married? I very much hope you'll have children soon because I think the bishop would be very pleased to hear this news. I offered to give him your address, but he didn't want it. He replied that it was useless because he was going to Athens in Greece. He would stay there for a while with the archbishop under whom he served. The archbishop's name was long, like an arm. I can't remember it. Do you know, they're going to Greece by plane. In short, when the bishop found out you were no longer at Drogeda to ride horses with him, he didn't want to stay long. He only rode horses once or twice, performed mass for the whole family every day, and a week later, he left Drogeda. Maggie put the letter down on the table. So, he knew. What would Ralph think? Was he sorrowful, and to what extent? Why had Ralph pushed her to act like this? It didn't solve anything. Maggie didn't love Luke. He merely played the role of filling the void left by someone who could give Maggie children that Maggie should have had with Ralph. Oh, everything was so complicated. Archbishop de Contini-Verch preferred an ordinary hotel to the room reserved for him in Athens. He had a delicate and rather important mission to discuss with the leaders of the Greek Orthodox Church. The archbishop understood that this assignment was a diplomatic test, a stepping stone for him to assume more significant roles in Rome, and he couldn't imagine coming here without Bishop Ralph accompanying him. Months passed, and the archbishop grew to trust this remarkable man more and more. A Mazarin, a true Mazarin. Archbishop de Contini admired Mazarin more than Richelieu, a comparison full of honor for Ralph. At that very moment, nearly 20,000 kilometers away, Ralph could finally remember Maggie without being tormented by the craving to cry. How could Ralph resent Maggie for marrying when he himself had urged it? He immediately understood why Maggie was so determined to keep her intentions secret, why Maggie didn't want him to meet her young husband, and also didn't want him to participate in her new life. At first, Ralph thought that no matter what, Maggie and her husband would remain in Gillenbilla. If not at Drogeda, then somewhere else where Ralph was sure she would be safe from worries and dangers. But upon reflection, Ralph understood that Maggie wanted, at all costs, to deny Ralph that sense of peace. Maggie was forced to leave, and as long as she and Luke lived together, Maggie would never return to Drogeda. Bob confirmed that the couple was saving money to buy a ranch in North Queensland. This news seemed to end everything. Maggie intended never to see Ralph again. But are you happy, Maggie? Does your husband treat you well? Do you love him? That fellow, Luke, he's just an ordinary farm worker, isn't he? What more could he offer that you'd choose him instead of Innes Davis, Liam O'Rourke, or Alistair McQueen? Did you deliberately choose someone I didn't know so I couldn't compare him? Did you act that way to torment me, to take revenge on me? but why don't you have children? What's wrong with that man, wandering around like a vagabond, forcing you to stay with friends? You don't have children, that's no surprise. How long has he been near you, Maggie? Why is it like this? Why did you marry Luke? In a very luxurious and expensive hotel near Ammonia Park, Archbishop de Contini Virch sat in an armchair by the window, gazing out at the balcony. He was deep in thought when Ralph entered. He turned and smiled. "Ralph, you've arrived at the perfect time. I was just about to pray. I thought everything was settled, or were there last-minute complications, Your Grace?" "It's not that. I just received a letter from Cardinal Montforty, conveying the Holy Father's intentions." Bishop Ralph suddenly felt his shoulders stiffen, his hands burning uncomfortably. "Your Grace, what's happened?" "In fact, everything is practically settled. Immediately after concluding the discussions I've been conducting here, I must return to Rome to be elevated to cardinal. I must continue my career at the Vatican by direct order of the Holy Father. And you will become Archbishop Ralph, and you will return to Australia to take my place as apostolic delegate to the Holy See." Bishop Ralph's mind reeled. He almost fell. Despite not being Italian, Ralph was to be honored with the position of apostolic delegate, an unprecedented decision. "Oh, why not? The Vatican has complete faith in you. You will rise to the position of cardinal." "Your Grace, I cannot adequately express my gratitude for the graces Your Grace has bestowed upon me. Thanks to Your Grace, I have received this special privilege. God has given me enough intelligence to recognize the abilities of a man who should not remain in the shadows, Ralph. Come now, let us kneel and pray." Ralph's rosary and prayer book lay on the table nearby. With trembling hands, Ralph reached for them, accidentally knocking the prayer book to the floor right beside Archbishop de Contini's feet. The Archbishop bent to pick it up, suddenly noticing the shape of a pressed rose on the page. The rose was hot and smooth as tissue paper, now faded to brown. "Oh, it's real. Why do you keep this in your prayer book? Is it a family memento? Perhaps your mother's?" The Archbishop's eyes, capable of seeing through deception and concealment, fixed on Ralph, leaving him no time to hide his embarrassment and emotion. "No," Ralph replied, frowning. "I don't want to keep any memento of my mother. But this flower must be very valuable, which is why you keep it with such affection between the pages you treasure most. What do these rose petals remind you of?" "A pure love I offered to God, Your Grace." "I understand immediately, for I know you very well. But does this love pose a threat to your love for the Church?" "No, it was precisely for the sake of the Church that I ended that love, ended it permanently. I have moved far beyond that woman, making any possibility of return impossible." "So I understand your sorrow, my dear Ralph. It's not as terrible as you imagine. Indeed, there's nothing terrible about it. You exist to serve many people, and you are loved by many. And the woman, with her love entrusted to that very distant but still fragrant memory, will never be truly wronged. Because you have kept that love as sacred as you have kept that rose. You don't think she understands any of this?" "Oh, she understands. If you love her so much, then with her very womanly nature, she is perfectly capable of understanding. Otherwise, you would have forgotten that woman and discarded that memento long ago. There were times when only persistent prayer prevented you from abandoning your responsibilities to go to her." The Archbishop left the armchair and knelt beside his friend, an elegant man whom he had loved among very few others apart from God and his Church. "You will never be allowed to abandon your responsibilities. You know that very well, don't you, Ralph? You belong to the Church and forever will belong to the Church. In you, the vocation is very real and profound. Now let us pray, and I will pray for this rose in my future devotions. God grants us many sorrows and many trials on our path to eternity. We must learn to endure. I must learn just like you." And with that, we conclude part 4 of The Hidden Birds Awaiting Death, a part filled with internal conflicts, difficult choices, and desires never fully satisfied. From Maggie to Luke to Ralph, each character walks their own path, carrying dreams, regrets, and wounds that are not easily healed. Life, whether sweet or bitter, continues to sweep them along the currents of fate. Will these broken pieces find happiness, or will they remain silent birds, forever waiting for something distant and elusive? Thank you for accompanying us on this journey of listening and feeling this story. Please look forward to the next part, where secrets, unexpected developments, and the deepest emotions will continue to be revealed. Don't forget to follow our audio channel so you don't miss any episodes. We'll see you next time. Goodbye and have a peaceful day.